I think people need to recognize we are not dealing with a cohesive culture that believes in rights in the Constitution. If you are going to a jury trial in D.C., you will go to jail.
Right.
And it is not because of some, well, you were convicted by a jury of your peers. It's because you're an enemy.
Right.
It's because you're a political enemy. Right. This is the kind of thing that we see in countries that are on the verge of collapse. Again, that is not prescriptive. I don't know what happens to the United States in the coming years, but I think it has been widely accepted by academics and journalists across the spectrum. We are in civil strife. Civil strife periods do not always lead to civil war. There, I said it. But we have talked about this quite a bit. I've been involved in copyright cases. First thing my lawyer says to me is, where can we file? You file in a blue district, you lose. You file in a red district, you win. No question. Tim Pool files a lawsuit in West Virginia over a copyright issue. That jury is going to be like, we love Tim Pool. Tim wins. You go to New York, they're going to be like, far right, he loses. It's not even about the merits anymore. Right. So every single one of these J6ers, let's take a look at the Antifa riots on January, I believe it was the 20th, 2017, at Donald Trump's inauguration, when the far left to hundreds, to 1,000 or so, rampaged through D.C., burning, setting vehicles on fire, starting fires in the streets, smashing up windows. What was the end result of that? Free to go with a payout. Many of these people filed a lawsuit against the federal government and won. Mm-hmm. They won money. J6ers, it didn't matter if you were. So I met a woman, her and her husband showed up several hours after the riots and everything had been breached. They were walking around D.C. and they walked up a clear and open pathway. They walked up to an open door, walked inside for a minute or two, looked around, and then left, having no idea what was going on. 18-month sentence. Because when you go to trial in D.C., you are standing before communists with one goal: to lock up a political enemy. End of story. Right. And there are too many people on the right who are like, I'm going to give my... Look, you're walking into a dragon's den to plead that he should not eat you. Mm-hmm. And I don't see why the dragon's going to be like, that was a great argument.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. No, and it's happened to so many people. And the thing that really we have to remember is that it's not over. Matthew Graves, who is maybe the biggest scumbag in the history of D.C., and that's saying something, he has declared that he's going to arrest 1,000 more J6ers. And they're arresting them at the rate of 5 or 6 a week. A lot of these guys that, 2.5 years go by after the first FBI visit, they think it's over. Mm-hmm. Suddenly they're arrested.
It's gross. It's because it's like badges of honor saying, look how many of those wild J6ers I locked up, but you're just wasting time and resources for your own political vendetta. And the thing is, all American taxpayers are paying for it. It's not just the people who vote Democrat. It's conservatives paying for their friends and family's conviction. I think that's gross.
And actual crime in D.C. is out of control because they're using all their resources to go after the enemies of democracy.
So let me ask this question then. Based on what we've seen with the J6ers and what we know about D.C. juries, 90+% Democrats. They don't care whether you did anything right or wrong. They care that you are a Trump supporter, and they're going to lock you up. Already, Missouri's AG, Andrew Bailey, has filed a lawsuit to the Supreme Court against New York. New York is interfering in the election with an unconstitutional gag order on Trump. He argues the people of Missouri deserve to hear from the frontrunner on what he has to say. And New York is threatening him, interfering in that election. They cite other things as well. What will the Supreme Court decide? I don't know. In 2020, when Texas sued Pennsylvania for unconstitutional changes to their electoral process, the Supreme Court's general opinion was, you have no standing. You are Texas, not Pennsylvania. That's wrong. Thomas and Alito both said that's wrong. They should have taken the case. The argument is, if we are all agreeing to rules of an election in the Constitution, and one state breaks those rules to alter the outcome, it does impact the votes of other parties to this system. It should have been answered. What do you think is going to happen? I mean this both rhetorically for the audience, people want to comment, but also an actual question. When various states invariably in this election launch the lawsuits against other states and to the federal government, and we know that a New York jury is going to decide Democrat wins, federal Democrat judges, Obama appointees, and it won't fall this way 100%. But Clinton and Obama judges are going to say Democrats win. Trump and Bush judges, maybe not necessarily Bush judges, but you'll see more so saying, no, Trump wins. What happens to this country when there are challenges to the election that are determined purely based on the politics of the region and not the merits of the case?
It's already happening. I mean,
well, of course.
Yeah. And I think it gets worse.
At the J6 level, we can see what happens. These guys. So let's stress this. There have been a few defendants who are acquitted because you can't charge someone with trespassing when they've been given no warning that they're trespassing.
That's like a handful, though.
It was like 2 or 3 guys.
Yeah.
One guy got convicted on some charges, but acquitted, had the other charges dropped because he wasn't trespassing, but he did do other things. One guy had a cop wave him in. And the judge said, yeah, that cop waved him in. So you can't charge him with trespassing. All charges dropped. However, the overwhelming majority of people, Democrats don't care. They don't care whether they knew they were trespassing or not. The law doesn't matter to them. They want you to burn. Yeah. So what's going to happen then when red states sue blue states? The Supreme Court says, not interested. There's not going to be a clean resolution. Donald Trump convicted in New York, and we know it's BS, and the Democrats cheer. Half the country knows those charges are false. Half the country doesn't care one way or the other. What's the resolution?
Yeah. Well, a perfect example is the recent Supreme Court 1512 decision, which all the J6 community was very excited about. The Supreme Court threw out the 1512 to say you couldn't use that to prosecute these people. And immediately, Matthew Graves, the next day, said, this is only going to affect 2 to 3%, and we're going to take 30 to 60 days to decide how we can change what we charge them with so that it fits in the Supreme Court decision. So they're never going to admit, even when the Supreme Court says they're wrong, they're never going to admit it. They're just going to try to find a way around it.
When Andrew Cuomo shut down churches in New York during COVID unconstitutionally, he was sued and he lost. Under the First Amendment, you cannot shut down a church. So what did he say? He took his executive order, crumpled it up, threw it in the garbage, and said, and now I'm going to make another one sign it. Sue me over that. Throws it out. The Supreme Court, the federal courts, cannot answer these fast enough. And so these despots are saying, I can do whatever I want until the court tells me otherwise, and then I'll find a loophole. And that's exactly what's happening now. It took how long? Honest question. How long did it take for the Supreme Court to finally answer that question?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And now they're going to say, okay, let's do a different charge. 2 more years of waiting.
Yeah.
And this is an instance where the process is part of the punishment. So even if they don't get you in, put you in jail for, whatever, 10 years or whatever they're trying to do, the fact that you get picked up, that you have to go through this, you have to defend yourself. It's a nightmare.
All your money. Spend all your money.
It's true. I mean, there's a guy, he's in holding in Brooklyn. Do you know who this guy is? He's been locked up for 3 years and they're putting him in solitary. He's not been charged yet. He hasn't faced trial. So when they're doing these things, there are people being held who haven't been charged yet. Okay. It's been 3+ years. It's remarkable to me that there's any person saying this country is not at risk of civil war. We are watching the federal government violate the Constitution straight to the faces of the Supreme Court justices who said, this charge is out, you can't do it. And they said with a straight face, we don't care what the highest court in this land thinks. We are going to wait before we drop the charges, and then we're going to find a different charge anyway. So the Supreme Court is powerless. At a certain point, maybe people on the right who keep denying that things are breaking apart in this country will recognize when the Supreme Court says it is so, and all of these states are increasingly saying we don't care, there is no Supreme Court anymore. There is no government when they deny your lawsuits, citing standing without merit. How about Pennsylvania? They ruled in the merits. The lower court said, actually, yeah, universal mail-in voting is a violation of the Constitution of Pennsylvania. And the higher court says, who cares? We pass it anyway. What happens? Where's the resolution to this? I genuinely don't know. My fear is we already have the Missouri lawsuit against New York citing election interference. We are going to get many, many more of these. The moment we see what Wisconsin just ruled, the ballot drop boxes are back. I don't know if you guys saw that one.
Yeah.
So we're now going to see a ton of lawsuits. They're probably already being drafted. You're going to get one state suing Wisconsin saying you are breaking the rules. Only the state legislatures can make these changes. We are going to end up at November with a plethora of lawsuits to the Supreme Court. A lot of these are going to be already what we're seeing now with A.G. Bailey's lawsuit. It's on the emergency docket. So after we talked about it, some people were concerned they filed too late. No, they said it's original jurisdiction on the emergency docket. The Supreme Court will have to answer this very, very soon. Is New York interfering in the election? I got a feeling they're going to say, standing, we're not getting involved. We are going to see lawsuit after lawsuit at the state level, because in the first lawsuit, Texas v. Pennsylvania, I think you had 48 states involved filing amicus briefs on behalf of other states. And then we're not going to get a resolution on any of these questions because we didn't in 2020. What happens if Wisconsin or any one of these swing states with mixed leadership, a Democrat governor and a Republican legislature, the election has changed? The legislature, once again, like they did in 2020, says these electoral vote counts are incorrect because we did not vote on these changes to the election law. The governor says, don't know, don't care, I'm signing anyway. A Republican-controlled Congress is now at an impasse. You will be removed from Congress if you allow uncertified electors that are being disputed to count. That's going to be the vice president. So Kamala Harris is going to be counting this, but with Republican Congress, it may be different. What happens when Wisconsin submits electors the governor says are good and the legislature says are bad? Do they throw them out? Do they run them through? What happens if, without the Supreme Court listening, they just say, we're going to say it's all through anyway, when Donald Trump is up several points? What happens if we don't get to 270 for either candidate because 4 or 5 states cannot solve their internal disputes over who's actually the electoral vote's going to? I have no idea. It may happen like 2020, where the lawsuits happen, the Supreme Court farts into their hands and then ignores the question. And then I don't see how the people in this country go through another period where there are legal challenges that go unanswered. The Supreme Court's refusal to answer Texas v. Pennsylvania has left a gigantic burn hole in the fabric of this country, and people are on edge. January 6th proved that. Mm-hmm. What happens in 2024 when you get the same thing times 10?
Mm-hmm. And what happens in 2024 if Trump actually does win? Do you really think they're going to allow him to take office?
Same thing.
Yeah.
There's going to be swing states. Let's say Trump wins Wisconsin. Governor's going to say, I won't certify. Mm-hmm. No, there were problems with our election.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
You got to save democracy.
Yep. If they're willing to file false charges against Trump, if they are willing to put his lawyers in prison, and Wisconsin is doing this, what makes anyone believe that in a close election in a swing state, the Democrat governor, who's the Democrat? Wisconsin's the Democrat governor, right?
Yeah. Is it Tony Evers, Wisconsin?
It might be. It's been a while. But what happens when this guy is just like, I'm not going to certify these electors because we've got election problems. Russia interfered.
Yeah.
So not submitting electors. Even if they know the end result is going to be a contingent election in the House where Republican delegations vote for Trump, maybe they don't even do it. Maybe you get some of these rhino Republicans who are like, I will not support Donald Trump. And then we're left in limbo with who's the president.
Well, so many of their congressmen are compromised. I mean, they can be manipulated, Republicans and Democrats.
They form some coalition and they decide we're going to compromise on who the president will be. And they make the argument that it shouldn't be Biden or Trump. And then they pick somebody else.
Hannah, you asked before about what was the biggest difference between Democrats back then and Democrats now. It's now they don't care about right and wrong. It's raw power now. Yeah. It's whatever they can get away with. That's what they're going to do.
It's interesting because when you talk about Joe Manchin, who just left being a Democrat, he's now an independent, it makes me think about there was a time when Democrats and Republicans wanted the same solution. They wanted the same end result. They wanted prosperous American people. They wanted them to have nice things, but how they wanted to go about it was very different. And so of course they were going to be in conflict. But now it seems as though, and probably not all of them, but generally someone who labels themselves a Democrat does not want the same thing as someone who considers themselves a Republican.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.